Okay. Last April, I was down at Bennett Springs with Bill Klumper and a couple of other veterans fishing at the Vets Fish Free event, and we weren't having any luck at all. And a young man, a local down there, gave Bill and some others a fly that he is using, and they started catching them left and right. And I think Bill finally wound up with 20 some odd fish that day. So I thought that looks like a pretty good fly. So I went up to the local fly shop and I got a copy of it. Brought three of them back home for patterns. And the name of the fly is the French dip. Kind of a strange name, but it's basically a Euro nymphing fly. And I've used it all over Nebraska with quite a bit of good success. So, but what's interesting is there's another fly called the Frenchie, and of course the gold-ribbed hare's ear we all familiar with. All three of those flies are basically the same fly with a little bit different thorax. So what I thought I'd do tonight is go ahead and tie all three of those flies, but show you a little my method for doing that sort of thing. Uh, it's kind of like I picked this up from Al and Gretchen Beatty when they were doing their Facebook pages or Facebook live streams on production fly tying. And I thought, boy, that's probably a pretty good way to do things. So I'm going to show you how I do that now, especially most of us, when we tie a fly, I don't, at least I do anyway, I tie 10 or 12 of them at a time because I'm usually going to lose 6 or 8 of them in the trees and in bushes and everything when I'm out. So I need a dozen flies and I might as well tie them all at once. And that helps oops, we got some folks coming in. And that gets your muscle memory back going and everything working very well. So let me go over to my, oh, there we go. To the materials bench and we'll talk about what we're going to tie. We're going to start with the gold ribbed hare's ear. You're all probably familiar with that. Pretty good. So as you know, gold ribbed hare's ear, the tail and the abdomen are tied with the fibers from a pheasant tail. The thorax, peacock herl. The body is ribbed, and I'm going to use gold ribbing tonight. And the ribbing I'm using is right here. Uh, I get this from off the web, and it's what they call lace wire. Um, it's a jewelry kind of thread, and this is 0.2 millimeter, which is about fine or maybe small. And let's see, yeah, the wing case itself, of course, is going to be pheasant tail. So let me grab some, go back over to the vise. Okay, I'm going to tie this on a GCO, a Green Caddis Outfitters, which is a good place to buy your hooks. A little bit cheaper. I've gone actually to the Fly Warehouse now, which was a place that Mick put me onto, and I actually get 100 flies for about or 100 hooks for about $7. So that's a little bit cheaper than what I'm used to using. Okay. I'm looking for my bodkin. I can't seem to find it right now. Thought I had it. Oh well. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to grab a few fibers off this feather for the tail. And I don't know, probably that looks a little bit big. There we go, right about there. So I'll grab them off like that. And I'm using the same technique that you've seen Mike do many, many times. I'm just going to get them all lined up and I'll pull them off the racus. Now I want this tail to be about the length of the shank of the hook. A lot of people will make them a little longer, but I like it a little bit short. So measure it. That's a little long, just a tad. There we go. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and tie that down. Oh, I suppose I ought to put some thread on that thing, huh? I'm using white thread tonight, and it's a 210 denier. I'm using white because it's easier to see on the camera. And I'll try to keep my hands out of the way, but I have no guarantees. There we go. Okay. And we'll just tie that in. I'm going to hold the feather on my side of the hook and let the thread torches take the feather up to the top. And I like tying the tail on a bare hook. It keeps it from bending and getting a downward tilt to it. Okay. And come back here. And we'll just cut off the excess, the waste material. Excuse me. Next thing I need to get is some of that wire. So let me go back over to the materials desk. Now I'll get some wire. And this is going to be for the ribbing. And I'll talk about the ribbing here in a minute. And why I like to rib these flies, other than the fact that it's what the pattern calls for. And when I rib, I like to put the wire up inside the bead. And again, I like to have the wire, for me, I like it on the top of the hook. A lot of people like it on the side or the bottom, but I like it on the top. There we go. Back here. Let me just put the material clip on that to hold it out of the way. Okay. Now for the body. And for the body we use again pheasant tail. And I'm going to get my bodkin out here, and I'm going to take about right about there, about that many. How do I know how many? Oh, it really depends on the size of the hook you're using. I don't have a rule of thumb or a measurement that I use. Mike, you may have one. I know a lot of people will use the gap of the hook. I just use what I think is about right. I'm going to tie these in so that the butts are oriented to my left or toward the back of the hook. So, and again, on my side, and let the torque carry it over. There we go. Right on the top of the hook, right where I want it. Now I keep lifting up because I want to tie this thing down so it's right on top of, but not past, where I tied in the tail. There, right there. Okay, now I'm going to put a half hitch on here. Sorry about that. I'm going to reorient that camera here real quick. There we go. Okay, we'll put a half hitch in it because I'm going to use the rotary feature of my vise. I've found that that works really, really well for these particular flies. The tail materials tend to want to separate. So I've found that the rotary feature helps keep that from happening. Okay. So I'm going to start rotating the vise. Now you got to be careful that you don't hit that hook point, because these things will break in a heartbeat if you hit that hook point. See, the nice thing about using your rotary is that you can hold on to the material and you don't have to let go of it, and it gives you a really nice body. Okay. Sorry about that. There we go. Up and over. Couple of wraps. I'm going to cut that off. Now, get rid of the waste. What happened?
Camera got knocked a little bit, maybe.
No, I hit the camera again. I haven't done this in so long that I'm not really used to it. There we go. Okay, last thing I want to do is put the ribbing on. Now I put the body on, rotating the vise toward me, which is the way you would normally wrap it. Now I'm going to reverse wrap the wire. That way I'm going across the grain of the pheasant tail. And that forces the wire to sit right on the top, so it makes it a lot more visible, and it also gives it a lot more strength. Now I got this little trick from Al Beatty. I'm going to come around here and reverse the way I'm wrapping. Normally you go from yourself to over the top of the hook. I just reversed my thread, so I'm going from myself under the bottom of the hook. And now I'll come back and use the wire again to reverse the thread one more time. And now I'm back normal. And now I'll just helicopter this off. And there is the body of the fly. And that's the same body I'm going to use on all 3 flies tonight. So I've already got them done. I've got several hooks tied up with the bodies already on them. So now I'll go ahead and finish out the pheasant tail. The first thing I need to do is put some peacock herl in. So I'm going to grab about 3 strands here, I think. 3 or 4. Let me get it here. There we go. Grab 3 strands here off of this guy. You can use strung peacock if you want. I just happen to have these around. And like we've said here several times, these things, the butts down here do get fragile. They tend to dry out. So I'm going to go ahead and click those off. And I'll go ahead and just, oh, I know what, I almost forgot. First thing I have to do is tie in the wing case. So I'm going to use one of my pre-tied bodies to select the proper size. Go. Okay, and I'm going to tie it in again so that the butts are to the left. And I'm going to tie it in so I've got about that much hanging over the end. I'll show you why here in just a minute. I'm going to bring my thread back to here. Back up over the top. There we go. Okay, now I can put in my peacock. I'll just secure that really well. I'm going to take 2 wraps behind. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab these peacock or these pheasant fibers. Back here where they belong. Okay, I'll get rid of this peacock herl, cut that off. Now I'm going to grab these fibers right here that I left on this thing, and I'm going to put them down, grab them down. There we go. Just like Mike did last week. And kind of tie it back there. Now you see what that gives me are my nice long legs. Now I can bring my wing case right over the top, like so. One, two, one, two. Up. We'll go ahead and cut this off. And I let those legs a little longer than I wanted to. But I'm going to leave them like that. Okay. A couple of half hitches and we're done. You could whip finish this if you wanted. And there is gold ribbed hares here with very long legs, unfortunately. Any questions on that one?
I have a peacock question.
Yeah.
Peacock has, I'll call it the fuzzy side and the flat side, right?
Yeah.
When you're dealing with more than 3 strands, I have trouble getting them so I get all 3 strands so that I'll call it the back side or the hard side is down. Do you just let it go or just
I never
what do you
worry
do?
about it, Bill. I know a lot of people
Okay.
do. They want that fuzzy side facing up all the time.
Hmm.
I just don't worry about that. I'm not that proficient at fly tying to worry about it. I have enough trouble just tying the fly.
Oh no, you do great. Okay, thank you. I was just curious, what y'all did
Yeah.
on that.
What's
Okay.
your take on that, Mike?
Um, so I was just tying a fly tonight with a peacock body. It was kind of a longer shank um, hook, and um, so what I did for that was like John did with three peacock hurls, and I just wrapped it until I ran out of peacock hurl, tied that down, tied in 3 more, and wrapped that forward. Um, a good practice if you're doing it that way is to leave your thread hanging and wrap it
Yeah.
using the weight of the bobbin to sandwich those 3 peacock curls together as you wrap. And I kind of get the feeling that when you do that, wrapping against that thread, I think kind of fluffs those hurls out a little bit
Yeah.
because it usually seems to be a pretty nice fluffy body.
Yeah. That's
If
been
you're
my
doing
experience
like
too.
a Royal Coachman where you have a little tag at the back and you want that to be you know pretty and everything, you want to try to get the stem, I guess it'd be the rachis or whatever,
Hmm.
it sticks out of the hurl in one direction, so like it's the bottom as you're looking at the pretty side of the feather,
Yeah.
and you want to try to wrap it so that stem is toward the eye of the hook. So as you're wrapping, each wrap covers the the stem from the previous wrap, and the way that those hurls they bend slightly, it just covers that over and it makes it a real fluffy section of hurl. Problem is that's not very strong,
Okay.
but it looks beautiful. Um,
Yeah.
then you've seen me before where I twisted the hurl around the thread
Hmm.
and use that as the wrap, and then the thread is mixed with the peacock herl. That gives it strength. And I mean, there's a few different ways of doing it, but really isn't a right or a wrong. It's just what you're doing at the time and how you want it to look. I hope that helps.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
I think the important thing to remember is that um, you're tying these flies for yourself and for fishing. Now, it's different if you're going to be entering them into a contest or something like that. Then you'd want to be concerned about that sort of thing. But for 99% of the time when we're tying flies, the fish don't care. Okay, any other questions?
I've got one for you. So do you
Yeah.
ever tie in with like a hot spot or anything up by the head as an additional attractor or anything like that?
I don't know. I usually use a black thread, but so the one I just tied, it stands out, and I usually try to keep the number of wraps down to a minimum up there, so that you don't see it too much. But Mike, what's your take on that?
Yeah, am I still on?
Yeah,
I didn't mute myself. So again, there's, you can make the fly whatever you want it to be. Um, but there are patterns that have a hot spot. Uh, really, especially with a bead head, like John was using a white thread, so it would show up good on the camera. You could use an orange, like a hot orange. You could use a red or a chartreuse thread. It doesn't show through the whole body of the fly, but when you get to the front, then it would have a collar that would give just a little bit of contrast. And I always say, you know, uh, contrast. It may not make it look like a natural insect, but it definitely catches the fish's attention. So they might see, I see, I see that fly now because it has some contrast. What is that? And they might go eat it or whatever. So it's kind of an attractor thing. You can put it at the tail end. You can do a little like a butt before you tie the tail in of a bright color. And all that is really is just or some people use a colored wire, like a chartreuse wire or red wire to rib the fly. Some people put a little bit of flash on the back of it for the wing case. Put a little bit of like a pearl mylar tinsel or whatever over the back of it. It's called a flashback pheasant tail. And it's just different things to add a little bit of attraction, catch the fish's attention, and then they look at it and say, "Oh, that looks like it might be food," instead of just leaves or sticks or whatever swinging by in the current. So, not a bad idea, but you don't have to do it. Have some with hot spots and have some that are plain. And some days the fish will like the plain ones. Some days they'll like the ones with the hot spots. So,
Yep.
Good idea.
and I don't always tie bead head. I mean, the original golden hares here was tied without a bead, and it had a black head. I mean, so what can I say? Anything else? Okay. In that case, like I say, I've already tied the body and ready to go. Let me go over to the materials camera. The next one we're going to tie is a Frenchie. And what I'm going to do, I'm using super bright steelhead dubbing right here. And I'm going to be using this red. So I'm going to take off. I don't need much. I'm going to start with that much right there. Can you see that? Not very much at all. Get some dubbing. Well, I better put some thread base on this first. I keep forgetting to put thread on it. Okay.
You need to switch cameras too.
Yeah, I do, don't I? Thank you, Mike. Okay. Now, if I was tying this one, I'd be tying with red thread, so you wouldn't see the thread so much. Okay, I'm going to use some of Al's dubbing wax here, and this is tacky because this particular dubbing is very, very difficult to work with. It's got a lot of gloss to it and a lot of sparkle to it, and I think what it is it just does not like the dub very much. So. You see what I mean? It doesn't make a very tight noodle. I'll start right back here. And let me get some more. I like this dubbing because it does have the sparkle to it. I hate this dubbing because it's so hard to use. You know, it's a love-hate relationship, I'm afraid. Okay. There we go. Half hitch or whip finish. And that is a Frenchie. You can see it's a gold ribbed hairs here with the thorax replaced with dubbing. Any questions?
A pheasant tail. You keep saying
Pheasant tail,
gold.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I keep wanting to call it a gold ribbed hare's ear. It's not, it's a pheasant tail. Questions on that one? The point I'm trying to make here is a lot of these flies have a lot of stuff in common with them, and you can go from one to the next to the next to the next with just minor modifications. And I thought it's kind of cool that you can do that. The third fly we're going to tie is the French dip. And I like to refer to this as Frenchie with a twist. So I won't forget this time. Start getting my thread on here before I go grab the. I'm going to use the same dubbing again. Let me do it on time. Oh God, we got plenty of time. Now, let me get some more. Let me put some more wax on this, or put some wax on this thread. Don't forget to put your cap back on the wax before you do anything else. Okay, this one I'm going to use orange. That's probably too much. We'll see. That's actually not orange, it's more of a yellowish gold. Okay. That's interesting. Am I spotlighted to you all?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sorry, Mick was asking if you could pin yourself so you would show up bigger. So
Yeah,
I
sorry.
tried to pin you instead, and I don't know if that helped or not. I was just trying to
Yeah,
talk to him.
somehow I got unspotlighted.
Yeah.
I'm not
Go
sure how
ahead.
that
Yep,
happened.
spotlight.
Now it's both.
Now it's
Pin and-
both?
Yeah. So that's good, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah. Can everybody see me now?
Better, Mick?
Okay.
I never noticed any difference if it was just spotlighted. So, but
Yeah. All right, so there
Sometimes
we
if
are.
there was a noise, it would flip.
Okay. Now I'm going to grab some Crystal Flash. Let me just go over here to the. And I got these little tubes from Kelly Gallup, and they're kind of handy.
John, what are they?
Huh?
What tubes?
This little tube here, see it?
Oh, okay.
He did a show someplace sometime and showed me these, and I said, well, that's cool. So I ordered some from him. Okay, so I'm gonna grab that tube and I'm gonna grab a hunk of or a couple of pieces of crystal flash.
So John, this is what is that for the dubbing that you have there?
That is called. Let me go back over to the materials camera. Oh,
That's the overhead.
that's the overhead camera. There it is. It's called Super Bright
Oh, okay.
Steelhead Dubbing.
Yep.
Mm.
Beautiful colors.
And aren't they though?
Wow, nice.
Yep.
I've got another one here that I also like. Let me see where I put it.
Talk about the material to use for hot spots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And oh, here it is. Here's another one, and this is even more difficult to use. UV lightning dubbing. And you can see
I
what
have
it
that.
looks like. And it's even harder to use than the steelhead dubbing.
Now, who
I
made
have that
that one?
stuff.
Was that Cascade?
Huh?
Who made the other one?
The lightning?
No, yeah, the light. Is that called Lightning?
Yeah,
Hook and
it's hook
Hackle
and
Company's
hackle.
where I got it.
It's the hook and
I got it
hackle.
at Hook and Hackle.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have the same stuff, and it's you just have to use very small amounts.
Yeah.
I mean, like I always 3 hairs and some air.
Yeah, really. Well, I tell you what, it is hard to use.
But you can always build more dubbing on. Same with that ice dub. If you do just barely enough
Yeah.
to even color the thread, and then add a little bit on top, and then add a little bit on top, you can make it a thicker dubbing noodle.
Yep.
But if you go there with a thick bunch, there's no way it's not going to twist around.
Yeah.
If you use a dubbing loop, it's good for all the ice dubbing and all that crinkle stuff
Yeah.
too.
Good point, Paul.
Good point, Paul. Very good. I hadn't
I
thought
mix
about using a
mine with-
dubbing loop on it, to be honest with you.
I've
There's a lot
done
of
that.
times you put it on and you think that it looks pretty good. You put it in the water, and the current just washes it all away, and you wind up with a bare hook.
I also I take some of that natural dubbing, just a regular dubbing, like a rayon or whatever, and I intermix that a little bit in with the crystal, flat, that ice dub to kind of help hold it together, and as it goes around, it kind of helps bind it all together. That's kind of what I do, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, I
This
put a little bit of
fly-
ice dub on here, a little bit of crystal flash here, and I'm going to pull this down. Couple of wraps. And now I'm going to little half hitch right there. Another one. Oop. One more. Cut that off. Oop. This light does not want to stay put. There we go. And let me just trim these. And that is the French dip. And the dubbing that you use is up to you. The crystal flash that you use is up to you. I've got some other stuff I've used that's holographic kind of stuff. It's really pretty. It's multiple colors, and that's been very effective. This gold has been very effective. So, it's so there you go. There's 3 flies. The hardest part of these 3 flies is the first thing you put on. The tail, the body, and the ribbing. After that, it's pretty straightforward. And again, the reason I wanted to show these three together is to show that you can take one basic pattern and with a few little tweaks here and there, make three completely or four completely different flies. So, any questions on those?
That French dip was the killer for us. Remember when we were down there at Best Fish Free Day?
Mm-hmm.
I think Gene got 27. Daniel got like 50, 51.
The French
trout.
dip.
Yeah, the French dip. It just knocked it out of the park where Gene, myself, and Emil, until then, we weren't catching anything. This kid's just pulling them in. By the time he showed us what he had already had like 25 or 30 trout.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it looked like it's a really an effective pattern.
Hence the reason I went up to what's his face is that fly shop up there and bought three of them. Used two,
Uh-huh.
promptly lost them, and thank goodness I kept the one. And I had well, you remember Mike? I was working with you you and Al Beatty both trying to find a pattern for it. And we finally found it, but it was not an easy pattern to find, and I've only found one YouTube video of it so far. So
And I have an original, so like you, I've got one I can
Yeah.
look at.
again,
Well,
it's
how do you-
that and the Frenchie are both primarily Euro nymphing patterns, but they work just as well in any, using any fly rod. So you don't have to have
Do you fish those under an indicator?
I did down at Bennett, but when I was using them out at Fort Robb, no, and I was fishing flat water at Fort Robb, so I did use them up on the verdigris, with in fast water and just let them drift like you would a normal nymph. That worked just fine. No indicator at all. I have this thing about indicators or, bobbers and fly fishing. I don't know. Hopper
not-
dropper is just another fancy name for a bobber, I think.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't have a problem with the plastic, bobbers and everything.
Yeah.
I just prefer not to fish with them because they can cause tangles and they're hard to cast and they flop in the water and all that kind of stuff. If I do want to use any kind of indicator, like I was saying a couple weeks ago, I'll do a dry dropper, like a stimulator when I know there aren't any stoneflies in the water. I know, even
Yeah.
colder water where I know there aren't going to be any big bugs landing on the water. I'll use that just as my bobber and then hang like a small nymph off the back of it, or like a gurgler for smallmouth, hang a bigger nymph off the back of it because a gurgler is going to float real good.
Yeah.
But maybe they'll take the gurgler, but a certain time of year they're more likely to take the nymph. But if you just throw a nymph out there, you're going to be on the bottom, and well, especially over shallow water, I just use a dry fly as my indicator. Then it's easier to cast. It doesn't make a big commotion when it hits the water. And then when a red and white plastic ball hits the water, fish is going to kind of look up at what was that splash, see that, and maybe get turned off. Where if they look up and they see some kind of insecty looking thing, maybe they don't want to eat it. They don't know what it is, but they're not going to,
Yeah.
it kind of looks more natural anyway.
I'm kind of with you, Mike. The only advantage I've ever seen to using my dad taught me how to fish by feeling the bite through my fingers and watching the line. So, a lot of people use the strike indicators to show them when they get a bite. And although I must admit, down at Bennett Spring, I have found that a dry dropper, I do have a lot more hookups because they take so soft down there that it's hard to tell. But yeah, I like using a dry dropper if it's really shallow and I don't want to get it down on the bottom. I want to keep it up high. So in that respect, I'm using it more like a bobber than anything else to keep the fly off the bottom of the water.
Right. Where I probably wish I would have had one when I was in Colorado, right outside of Estes is Big Thompson Canyon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some areas in that river where there's some kind of slower slack water, and every one of those spots was already taken by a guide with a couple of fishermen or whatever.
Yeah.
The only places that I could actually find open water on that river through that canyon was a couple of faster areas. And I did, very quickly hook and quickly lose a brown. But it's just such fast water, it's hard to fish with a dry dropper, or even just a nymph or a streamer. It's just moving so fast you don't really know what's going on.
Yep.
If you were to have an indicator like that, that's definitely a good use for it to me.
Yeah.
Fast water like that.
Yeah, I know the majority of people down at Bennett, they use a strike indicator, don't they, Mick? I know you like strike indicators down at Bennett. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. And I'm trying to learn other stuff, but it makes it pretty easy. They do hit extremely light down there. And even with
Yeah.
the smallest indicator, it twitches. It doesn't drop or anything
Yeah.
like that. So
And
if
that's
you're
a key.
trying to,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you try to tight line it, keep it tight, because if you have a little slack in there, you're not going to feel it.
Yep.
I
That's true.
always watch my line, but especially if you're fishing upstream, or you're even in slack water like that, if the bite's real light, you're not going to see it.
Mhm.
You're rarely going to detect it with your line, where you know there's a right situation for every method,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.